Okay, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Thomas Morning Owl, and I'm with the Confederated Umatilla tribes up here in Northeast Oregon. Right now, my position here, I'm a master speaker of the language, and I do help out with the documentation and the preservation of the Umatilla language. Also, be here in the near future working with the Walla Walla language as well. I've been elected to the Tribal General Council as the interpreter for governmental purposes, and it's a governmental position within our tribal government. And I've been serving at that now for a number of terms. As a language instructor, I also teach cultural classes, and a lot of my passion is food, our native foods. And I had the opportunity a number of years ago to attend a conference there at Berkeley, and I presented with Dr. Eugene Hun on matters that were, about the native plants and that type of ethnobiology. And I can't quite remember what the hall was that I was in there, but it was quite an experience, and it was truly what a good time that we had been able to share. But right now, I would like to begin to say that as a young child, I was raised in a home that was primarily very culturally based upbringing, in that every spring, that's what we had done. We went out from the beginning of spring till the fall time, gathering our native foods, the roots, the berries, salmon. And I became a hunter and providing for my family when I was 9 years old. So I've been very, fortunate in being able to be raised in a way that encompasses the whole a whole gamut of native foods, from not only the men's foods, but a number of the processes that are used in procuring what we call the ladies' foods. And I'm not gonna, dwell on what's a man's food and what's a woman's food or that type of stuff today, because the way I believe is that we all need to know, have a grounding in what our native foods are, because hunger doesn't know if you're a man, doesn't know if you're a woman, doesn't know if you're a child or if you're an elder. It is across the board, and that's the thing that we have to kind of step back from, is these stereotypical, falsely created norms that have been a lot of times imposed on us. In the past, in the historical past, although may not be written, but some of the stories of when our men would go on forays out into the surrounding areas, into enemy held territory, they never would take the ladies with them. So they had to fend for themselves. They had to have that working knowledge of what was available as they went along on these war outings and forays. So, it's not a thing that is set in stone to differentiate. Well, just because I'm a man, I'm not going to be digging roots. Just because I'm a woman, I'm not going to be shooting a deer. My grandfather stressed it to us over many, many times that, when you're a family and you are working to provide subsistence for your family in the wintertime, you all got to work together. There's no, oh, mom will do it for me. Oh, sister will do it for me. Brother will do it for me. No, it's got to be a cooperative effort. And a lot of our foods out there, they're only in season for a short time. So the more hands on the ground, the more you're able to procure, the more you're able to process to set aside for winter. And this is coming from a time when there were no such things as Walmart or Safeways, Costco, where you can just jump into vehicles, speed down to the store, get whatever you want, then head on home. No, you had to have a lot of foresight and a lot of dedication in order for your family to survive in a good way. And sometimes when policies that were imposed upon us during the reservation era, when they began to establish reservations here in Oregon in the mid 1800s, 1855 on up, that it was a restriction of mobility, that where a lot of our people had to have passes to leave the reservation, although it was in the treaty that we had the ability and the reserved, and I'm going to come back to that word reserved, remember it, reserved right to gather our foods, in the usual and accustomed areas. So that would mean to leave the reservation, to head down to Columbia River to fish, or to go up into the mountains to gather roots. But then by the time the agents were empowered on the reservation, they had a permit system by which you could not leave the reservation unless you had written permission that had to be signed by a local non-Indian person that can vouch for your character. And so by that restrictions that they had done is, we as a tribe and different families were not able to gather enough of their food roots at the seasons to survive. So as a matter of control, the rations that they would give out at the reservation was had become to be the sustaining factor for them to survive through the winter. And it became a method of control that was backed up by not only policy, it was backed up by practices that were introduced by clergy, whether it be the Catholic or the Protestant, Presbyterians and Methodists, whatever it was, is that they begin to impose restrictions that to say, if you these false doctrines to say that when you've lost a person in your family, well, you shouldn't be out gathering. It's a time for you to heal yourself. That became established within our tribal community to this day. There are people that say, well, I can't go root digging, I can't go fishing, I can't go hunting because I lost a cousin, and because until I have a giveaway, I can't go out. Well, that's just a false invented restriction that was imposed upon us, and it became culturally acceptable within our community. Otherwise, had it been in the times past, there's a time for mourning, yes, but it was only the widow, the widower, or parents when they lost their first child. That's what they would call as outney, when you stand back and you then it's up to the children and relatives to provide for that those people that were tabooed from the gathering areas. But now they try to extend that to all facets of family life, and so for that reason, now it becomes an easy escape. It becomes a invented norm and imposed norm that our people still accept, and it just becomes an excuse for the most part, because going out to dig roots, going out to pick berries, going out to get fish, going hunting is a lot of work. And then if you could take the easy out and say, oh, I can't go do this because I've lost someone in my family. Well, you're taking away from your children's legacy. You're not teaching them anything for them to carry on. Then we become more dependent on today's stores and the availability of the food as it is, rather than going out and getting it for ourselves. And so that's one of the challenges that we have in our modern life, through these invented and imposed regulations that become a matter of convenience for families to not practice our our tribal gathering techniques, so it becomes a matter of contention. And so, as I have begin in the at the start of this presentation, I ask you to remember the word reserved. And all of you that are academics that are sitting in this room right here now, I'm gonna share something with you, and this is a heartfelt sentiment that I want to share with each of you, because as you go from Berkeley and you begin your professional lives at whatever capacity, either you'll be working in the field of a social structure that may have to deal with tribal nations in the future. And as you go forward from your educational nest area that you're right now participating in and getting these forming these ways of thinking that is going to be unique to each one of you. One of the things I'd like to impart to you is that when our Native communities speak to the fact of what we call reserved rights in a treaty, the negotiation for my tribe was in 1855. It was at the Walla Walla Treaty Council up in Walla Walla, Washington. And it was a time that our tribal leaders, not only from my tribe, the Umatillas, the Cayuses, and the Walla Wallas, but it was dealt. This great council was called for the Yakimas, the Nez Perces, and all the surrounding tribes, in order for the U.S. government to extinguish the tribal ownership rights for all the land in which we occupied. My particular tribe was meant to relocate to the Yakima Reservation in Washington, or the Nez Perce tribe in Idaho. But a last minute revolt against that proposal ended up in the creation of our reservation here in Oregon, the Umatilla tribe. But then the rights that were encapsulated within the language of our treaty wasn't a gift from a benevolent representative of the U.S. government that by treaty, by the swoop of a pen, created us magically as brown-skinned people that were impediment to U.S. expansion. It was not that way at all, that when the reserved rights that are encapsulated in that treaty were reserved from a governance system that existed prior to the American government within our homeland. So these treaty rights that we speak of, you've heard about them in the Ninth Circuit. There's been court case after court case reaffirming that these rights do exist, not as a benevolent gift from a patrimonial U.S. government. No, there was the foresight from our elders that kept these rights that they were essentially governing prior to the existence of the United States anywhere in the western reaches of what is now United States of America. So these rights predated England, predated Spain, in the fact that they are occupying, colonizing forces. So when we talk about these rights, and we try to keep them as strong as we can, is because this is something that the governance of our people, our tribal elders, was set aside for us to exercise these into future generations. And so if, now as you're sitting in this class in Berkeley, the right that you have that are encapsulated in the Constitution of the United States, one of the greatest, most endearing, and perhaps the most important, is your freedom, your freedoms that are enumerated in the Bill of Rights. you have the right to free speech, the freedom of religion, and all those type of things that are, we as Native people now, since the citizenship of 1920, the 1920s, we also have the same inherent rights that are protected by a constitution. But we do have those additional rights that were reserved to us to gather our foods, to travel in these areas that has been abridged over time, but we're trying to make them stronger. And you as students now will have that responsibility as you go forward from your institution of higher education with the knowledge that, you know, our Native peoples in different areas have different legal standings that are inherent to the gift that our tribal nations had gave to your forefathers. If anybody got anything from the treaty process, it was the American citizen. It was nothing given out of love and mutual respect to the Native people. No, our people gave the right of the United States to exist within our homelands. So everything that is from that day until now is a result of the beneficial negotiations on behalf of the United States that guaranteed you the right to sit in that desk, give you the right to the freedom of speech, freedom of education that you wish to pursue and you desire to pursue. Those are the things where the gifts are at. So when it comes to treaty policy, as you go out into your professional lives, that's the thing that I would like to impart to you, is that the treaties are in your better benefit, in the benefit of the United States citizenry, rather than the Native populations that have existed prior to the establishment of government within our homelands. And so those rights to fish, to water, to roots, to gathering, those are the things that we have to protect as Native people, that we'd like to impart to you as students and future leaders, that this is a responsibility and a gift that was that a gift to your generations now, that our forefathers encapsulated within the treaty language. So that's one thing I'd like to impart.
I have a quick question for you, Thomas,
Yes.
before you go on. Just because I think what you're saying is so important, I hope that everybody can understand. You're kind of like sharing a lot of knowledge pretty quickly. So let's say the date is prior to 1926, and we're having this, this communication. Are you in, where you are right now, Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation, is that in the United States of America? In your opinion, I mean, is this, what is that relationship at that time?
Okay, within a timeline structure of the time of 1926, when the
prior to that.
Prior, we were considered by US government wards of the government, because the benevolent overseer, the great powers that be, the Indian agents had the by law, by American law, the authority to make decisions over day-to-day management of tribal lives. This colonial type of mindset that says we have the ability to make the decisions for these poor brown people that are ignorant, that don't know anything, that they have no rights whatsoever. And up until 1926, we did not have the rights of citizenship in the United States. And so as that came to be, a lot
of you did have citizenship in the CTUIR.
Yes, yes. As a tribe, our people were citizens within the tribal community, but not as a standing as U.S. citizens. So we were kind of displaced within our own homeland without guaranteed citizenry and identity as individuals, because and now since 1926, the striving that we came has come to be that was still under the auspices of the office of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BIA, or as I kind of colloquially like to think of them, bossing Indians around, BIA. And that they were the ones that were calling the shots for the management of lands, monies, and different things that if you were considered competent then you might be able to do some of your own competent in the eyes of the agent, then you can make some of your family decisions. But then for the most part, it was all resting in the office of the Indian agent. In 1949, my tribe, the Umatilla Reservation tribes, there are three of us, the Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Cayuse, established a constitutional form of government that we still carry today. And in that, it strengthened our self-determination to manage our own tribal affairs. And in that, we've made strides to enhance and protect the rights that were reserved for us by our elders in 1855, that when our elders at that time, the leadership, gave the biggest gift of all to the United States is to allow you to exist within our homelands as a government, and the citizenry that benefited from that negotiations. Those treaties must be honored. And as far as I'm concerned, the people that need to celebrate those treaties are the non-Indian American non-Indian American citizens, because that's where their right to own land, to their freedom of religion, their freedom of speech is all based on the acquiescence and the ceding of the legal land claim of our tribes to the United States. When we ceded that to them, it gives these students the ability to pursue all the things that they do as full citizens of the United States, which was lacking in our communities until 1926. Then was further brought forward in 1949 with the adoption of our tribal constitution and setting up of our modern governmental system.
So to be clear, so a group of U.S. citizens who are not citizens of Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation can enter into usual and accustomed ceded lands as well as reservation land without a passport because of those colonial negotiations. That's one of the topics that you.
Yes, exactly, because up until by the negotiated language in the treaty, there were to be no non-Indians, no non-natives to enter into the reservation without the express consent of the Indian agent. Well, that didn't happen. Our reservation lands were encroached upon right from the beginning, before it was even solidified and demarcated. There was all kinds of trespass that happened, and as Native people, because we didn't have the right to stand in court to defend ourselves, those policies continued to happen. And so now we have the expressed and reserved ability to gather all of our food routes, the salmon, the deer meat and the harvest, all the things that we need as in our traditional foods and that type of stuff on any lands that are managed by the United States government or even state government. So that would be Forest Service lands, BLM lands, state lands, that type of stuff, sorts of lands that are, those rights are inherent to the language of the Treaty of 1855. And we continue to enhance that, and by cooperative agreements and cooperative efforts, that are spearheaded by like-minded individuals that have a passion, that's it's a win-win for the most part, rather than the great white rancher that comes in twirling his rope and his six gun in the image of John Wayne and shoots his six gun in the air and 10 Indians fall over and we all acquiesce and worship the ground he walks on. Those days are past. Those days are past, and we got to go into a time now that we can work with young minds, young students, as your students are there, that can formulate these type of policies and procedures in the future. That's beneficial to all parties involved, and that's what I would really reach out to your students there. The one that's kind of dozing in the back right there, not just kidding, not just
You're not gonna call anyone.
no, but that's the type of thing that we have to open the hearts and minds of the American overall, because we find the greatest opposition that we have to anything that the tribe tries to move forward with is not the people that are situated miles from the reservation. It's our border neighbors that have, the greatest amount of prejudice. And I don't know, it's a social thing that closeness breeds contempt at times. I don't know. I can't understand it. And in the fact that we're talking about the lower Snake River dams, and we've gotten this far, is the greatest opposition we have, or those that are closest to us. And we've got to find and look for a way to further those types of discussions. Whether those things will ever come out is beyond me. I don't know. But what's the benefit that we're trying to reestablish? It's the salmon runs. Well, who's going to benefit from that? I believe everybody. You see that same argument and opposition almost to the point of armed conflict in the Klamath River Basin. And you have people that are close to the Klamath River tribes that go through town spewing racist remarks, you sucker eaters, whatever. It's the people that are local that have the greatest amount of opposition for whatever reason. And those that are from the outside that don't have that clouded vision kind of will say, well, what can we do? What can be done that's going to come out to be a mutually satisfying solution? How do we get there? And as the students are there, that's the type of mindset and heart set that I would like to foster, that would be able to be initiated. It only takes a word. Hello. It only takes an idea to implant implant an idea that's going to grow. The tallest oak tree doesn't come from a big block of wood. It comes from a small acorn. And all these type of things, there's a fertile grounding by which that, it's not through preaching at you. We're just kind of, trying to show and trying to open an avenue, open a heart, open a mind to say that, yes, we have these norms that I didn't establish. Academia didn't establish them. The federal government did back in the 1800s, and even before that. It started with the doctrine of discovery, and we're still feeling the fallouts of that after 500 years. And what is it going to take? It's going to take a dedication and a way of reanalyzing the status quo that has developed over the course of 500 years. 5 minutes is not going to do it. 10 minutes is not going to do it. 5 hours won't do it. And but it's a beginning. And I do hope that my words are not found to be overly offensive or confrontational. But I would like to, truly establish that, as future leaders, the future leaders that are sitting in that classroom right there will take away from my presentation an idea that we can get there in any type of management system that is yet to be established, whether it be for the redwoods, whether it be for addressing the small areas that we can to do our best to overcome the global warming. Something that, is going to be a challenge to their generation and to their children's generation. What are we going to do? Are we going to be confrontational about it? Are we going to look to have a mutual respect? We can agree to disagree, but then the thing is that, it's not going to amount to anything with all the talk that we do and not doing anything and opposing each other. Well, all the hot air that comes out of our mouths might as well help out the global warming. So rather than allowing this to permeate and guide us in the future, let's begin to start opening these doors.
So I want to ask a question, follow-up question, and then we'll take questions from the audience because I'm sure people have a number. You're talking about this kind of collective social responsibility to address these pressing issues, and I want to underscore. You mentioned the dams. You personally and also in collaboration with others have been involved in really countless projects. So many landscape projects that it would be impossible to enumerate them in a day, in terms of just so many different watersheds, restoration projects, addressing issues, negotiation between farmers sometimes and upstream, hatcheries and salmon, and not to mention root fields and management and forestry and all these things. So I want to kind of mention that, but also, if you can just one more time go over how, first of all, these retained rights that have been retained despite the colonial government of the United States of America that institutes things like dams and things like wind power stations and flooding all those old towns and cities and all of those big programs, which at the time in the 1930s when they were created and they continue to be created, there is a narrative that they're helping everybody. But they do sometimes really compromise a lot of these retained and reserved rights and responsibilities. And I wonder, in your own words, what is the social responsibility of people who are not even necessarily tribal citizens in terms of being an active force to take collective responsibility and work together to address some of these really pressing issues?
I believe that a collective responsibility that all citizens of affected areas need to understand is that, we're all here in the now. Our children will be here in the future. And sometimes when the non-native cultures who have a more transient ideology of what the land means to them, it manifests itself in this extraction type of mentality. Well, we got to get all the trees off of here and make the best profit that we can. And to heck with the future, they can fend for themselves. That has happened since the first contact, that, it still continues. Now there are small steps that are being taken to alter the full-on course of destructiveness and total extraction in different ways, especially with farming techniques that are being developed, no-till, and how that begins to really impact the land itself, that conserves a lot of the fragile over
Topsoil.
lay
Yeah.
and topsoil, in that when they begin to start developing these different techniques, the dust no longer settles into the waterways, and it's not clogging up the salmon reproduction areas and that type of stuff. So it all begins to start cycling bigger and bigger and much more effect than we think that we're going to get. And then it's surprising to know that as it begins to open and show itself, that these policies do have unintended benefits that are, massive in the scale. When you look at the thousands and thousands of acres that are being plowed and tilled, you look back at the 1930s Dust Bowl, how that may have affected many of the salmon-bearing streams and other things of that sort. That's only one example. The extraction mindset of deforestation has come around to bite us in the behind, because a lot of the runoff that those forested areas sheltered and caused to remain intact were negatively impacted by the whole process of that extraction economy. I don't believe any of the participants there, how many of them come from logging areas? By a show of hands, how many people come from an area where logging has been a great, huge economic? No one from a logging area.
Maybe logging is not a very successful industry in California right now.
Okay, but then why I was saying that is a number of years ago, when I was a kid, there used to be, every town that had a sawmill had this great big huge structure that was built. They called them wigwam burners, and all the mill ends and everything that was considered a byproduct, the broken boards, the wood chips and everything were dumped into this great big huge structure, and it was set on fire and would burn for days. The smoke so that practice is no longer done, because they found economically viable alternatives that they could use their byproduct for. Wood pellets, all different types of things that they can develop from that. So that's no longer a practice. You'd be hard stretched to even find a wigwam burner this day and age. They just don't exist anymore. You look at the number of aluminum plants that used to be situated along the Columbia River. They're no longer there. And those type of things, time marches on, changes happen. And then by the participants that you have in this classroom right here, they're going to be the mindset, they're going to be the brain trust of tomorrow. And then by able to look at different situations, with the open heart, open mind, and looking out to something that may be beneficial, is something that I would charge them with. I would actually challenge each of these students to develop something that's going to be able to be followed within their lifetime, whether it be,
Well, actually, Thomas, I remember you suggested here at Berkeley a studio, an architecture studio, where we would look, collaboratively at some of these post-industrial, post-extractive towns where there are still, a lot of people living from all different kinds of backgrounds. But today, with that extraction economy to some degree gone. There's a lot of health issues.
Exactly, exactly. And we look at the different types of impacts that have been done, whether it be through the extraction economy or even the in the 1940s, the wartime era, when the industrialization of the Columbia River, and nowadays there's such a high incidence of cancer, not only in the Native community, but in many communities that border the Columbia River. But it impacts more so the Native people because of the fish that our people eat, and the amount of fish and stuff that, you know, and it's a tip of a problem that has yet to be really, truly identified. We have Hanford here, we have the mills and the effluents that go into the river cause a, and if we could just sit down with affected communities to try to map out what are the risks that we've been dealing with. The latest one to come up into the national scene right now that has a lot of people jumping, and for whatever reason, at Camp Lejeune. You know, nobody thought anything of it back in those times, but now that it has come to be truly identified, it's a worldwide outreach. So if we can even just begin to establish risk and affliction rates for a number of things that we can deal with, that would be a positive.
So I want to see if some folks have some questions.
Wow. Wow. If I can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bull.
Yep, make sure.
Hi, yeah, I don't have a question, but I guess I just want to say thank you for being so direct in your charge to us and yeah, being so sort of clear and I mean, not confrontational, as you said, but like just very upfront with some of the issues that you have faced and like are currently being faced by all of us now. And I just appreciate that.
One of the things I would like to say, how many of the participants there are from Southern California? Anyone from Southern California? You can admit it, you know, we're not gonna hold it. Okay, because
around the country too, so.
okay, and different countries. Because you see, we have an outbreak in across America of wildfires in different areas, and some are more susceptible than others. And Southern California is a prime example that, you know, when the traditional practices of clearing and management of areas takes away fire from the equation, and for a number of years is taken away, then the debris and the fuels that add up continue to, you know, they continue to add up, and they cause exponentially higher risk for damaging fires, whereas, you know, Native people, especially up here in the Northwest, use the prescribed fire to manage a number of food gathering areas that once the policies of the United States government came in and forbid those type of practices, they're coming home to roost. They're coming home in droves, that many of these areas that were managed for the optimum yield of roots or optimum yield of berries that our people practiced over millennia was cut off in 150 years, and then now we're reaping the benefits of that oversight. It's amazing to see the damages that can be done because one person doesn't want to listen to another person's experiences.
So united we stand, divided we fall here. What is there another question? I know some of you probably work in environmental planning. Some of you have probably addressed river restoration. Here is someone who's very involved in that. Okay.
I have a
They're
question.
awestruck. They're awestruck. My God.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm in a river restoration course right now, and we were just doing a site visit looking at restoring native habitat for coho spawning salmon. And I'm curious, when you have worked on projects for protecting salmon habitat or river restoration, are you able to do those projects fully working with people from the indigenous tribe, or does it become a challenging project when you have engineers from outside the reservation and you have EPA regulations, or what is your experience with that?
Okay, I can go back a number of years, back into the prevalent scientific practices of the 1950s up to the 1960s, where the great minds in hydrology espoused a quick get rid of it, the faster you get rid of it solution for any type of rivers. They took out the meanders. They encased a lot of riverways. You see that right in Los Angeles. The rivers there are encased in cement. It's really a prime area for graffiti, but then for the water itself, you know, it doesn't do anything. Once that water goes through that sluice, it's gone. There's a town up here, Walla Walla, that has that same thing within the city limits. They have that encased waterway that defines what the creek and the rivers are now. That was the top of the scientific thinking in its day, but we come to find out that wasn't the right way of doing things.
So are you essentially suggesting that over time, there is an emergence of better practices and better knowledge that sometimes is related to actually caring about the foods such as salmon as part of a life cycle?
Exactly, because now within our tribe, we have a number of projects that are reestablishing free flow in different waterways in different areas, that the effects have been phenomenal in the fact that not only does it enhance the targeted fishery, but there are many side benefits that were unforeseen that just come about, where Mother Nature and nature in itself developed in these areas for millions of years. And you know, the way that these meanders, the 3 S's of a stream, there's a speed, silt, and speed. And when that's all regulated in a natural way, it begins to have effects that are, you know, not only for the stream itself, but many other diverse types of biomes that are next to the river, whether it be upland or within the stream bed itself. These things, you know, took millennia to develop. It took 150 years to take it away. So how many years is it going to take to restore? That's a commitment that we have to start building right now. And I would hope that, you know, before it's too late, that, you know, these mindsets can be changed, because, you know, we're all adverse to sudden change. We're adverse to things that's going to make us feel uncomfortable. But we've made our mother uncomfortable for 150 years now. How are we going to apologize to her? And I'm talking about our Mother Earth.
Well, I think that's a great point to end on, and very unifying. And So I want to thank you very much. We'll have a round of applause.
Thank you. It's not me, it's you. You students are going to be the ones carrying this ball into the future, and I
Thanks
wish you
very
all the
much.
best. Yes, thank you, there, Waxman.